It's a pleasure and an honor being here. I'm going to open by reading something that I wrote on yesterday, which is kind of a look back to my life 10 years ago. Mrs. Johnson, we understand your child was a straight-A student in Louisiana, but this is Alabama. An A in Louisiana does not amount to an A in Alabama. An A student from Louisiana can easily be a C student in Alabama, so we're gonna need Ms. King to take some tests. I was 11 years old, and I wanted to go home. Home was New Orleans, but they said home was gone. Am I taking these tests because I'm black and they don't want me here? Or am I taking these tests because I'm black and they think I'm dumb? I know all about Alabama. Are they being racist, or is it something I don't know about home? Because my report cards don't mean nothing here. I don't even want to go to this school. I don't even want to be in this state. Take the damn test, Tareian. She was looking at me dead in my eyes. Didn't pack a pencil. Didn't know I would need one in Alabama. I was tired of feeling the need to prove myself to people. If it wasn't placement tests, it was the annoying country children outside, asking me to say this and say that, asking me that I lose everything, even though I repeatedly wore the only 3 outfits I evacuated with. I hated them, and I hated Tuscaloosa. Luckily for me, I had heard that schools were going to be opening in New Orleans. When we stopped at the Red Cross place on our way to Alabama, they had a lot of school supplies. I grabbed enough for me and my friends back in New Orleans. 6th grade had just started. Ms. Nichols didn't have a chance to give out the school supplies list. My best friend, Brittany, had grabbed me some clothes that people was donating in Texas. We always looked out for each other. First day of school, all advanced placement classes. I guess those Louisiana aides meant something after all. In my mind, I was still going home. We just was waiting on the city to open up those schools. I met another girl from New Orleans. She wasn't Brittany, but she could use the school supplies. Apparently, I wasn't getting those clothes from Texas. I had gone to the same school since kindergarten, Robert Russell Moulton Elementary School. Every year they were adding a grade. We weren't ever going to have to leave. I had the same friends since kindergarten. Now I was surrounded by the country bumpkins. That's what I called them. Alabama was fast. All the girls with their hair hanging in cool clothes, not uniforms. They were into guys and sex. I had my Shirley Temple curls and was nerdy. Not let people beat me up and make fun of me nerdy, but feisty nerdy. My favorite shirt was this shirt that said, "Black is beautiful." I was really looking forward to wearing it to school. Plus, my hair was fresh. I sat down in math class and heard somebody laugh. "More like black is ugly," she said. She was this tomboy girl, but I was from New Orleans. I wasn't scared of nobody. If I could deal with them children out the ninth ward, I could take on the country bumpkins. The only good thing about Alabama was the school. They had everything: swimming pool, football field, soccer field, a track, a place for baseball and softball. I called it a Lizzie McGuire school. It was a television show on Disney. I couldn't relate it to any school I had ever seen in New Orleans. I had never been exposed to the private high schools, but I knew none of the public schools looked like it, nothing like it. 6th grade passed and 7th grade passed. It was still me and Lanisha. My mama was kind of sad about me not fitting in, but she became my enemy in middle school. Show yourself friendly, Tareian. You'll make friends. I had friends at home, good friends. If you were so concerned about my friends and my well-being, we would be home, but we not. So, looking back at it, my mama let me get away with a lot those Alabama days. Schools had opened, and we were still in the country. I had made the honor roll every year. When 8th grade came around, I opened up. I joined the track team. It took me 2 years to make friends in Alabama and start liking it. I was going to go to Northridge High School the next year. That school was huge. I mean, like bigger than 3 New Orleans public schools put together. My mama was always homesick. She was always going to New Orleans. I even started asking, could I stay at my friend's house while she go home? I had really made progress. The last day of 8th grade, she told me we were going home. I cried the whole ride. Ends wasn't meeting, she said. Money wasn't coming, she said. If she was going to struggle anywhere, it was going to be New Orleans. I cried the whole ride home. I went to visit Benjamin Franklin for a day. I couldn't find anyone that was like me, just kind of regular black students, not the assimilated ones. Then I wanted to go to a school where when Mardi Gras came, I could say, that's my school. That was important in New Orleans culture. Benjamin Franklin had an orchestra. Of course, my mama didn't care. I called myself trying to fail the test for admission, but still ended up passing. I begged her to not make me go to that school. You waited until I made friends, until I started liking Alabama to leave. It's the least you can do. We pulled up at McMain. I could have died. What was the trait? Baseball, football field. Then the inside of the building just was worse as the outside. Walls falling down, heater broke. It was nothing like Northridge in Alabama. Everybody had an H for honors on their schedule. School was a joke. I didn't have to do anything. Open book tests, worksheets, just easy stuff. Katrina had changed McMain. 10th grade year, I fell in the hands of teachers who took their job seriously. I hated to admit it, but I began to realize what the difference was from a Louisiana aide and an Alabama aide. But this just was post-Katrina New Orleans. A Louisiana aide in elementary had meant studying and working hard. Now, an aide at McMain was nothing. There was a difference between the two education systems. I didn't care about the band anymore. I was concerned about my education. I liked the challenge and the feeling of defeating the stereotypes in Alabama. It seemed like nobody cared in New Orleans whether you made an A or an F. The majority of the teachers didn't give a damn. Every year I had a substitute for math. 9th to 11th grade, all I learned was slope. I made a 19 on the ACT the first time I took it and only knew 2 questions out of 60 on the math portion. Every year my mama tried to get me in private school. I would pass the test, but the money wasn't available. My cousin had just enrolled in Sci Academy Charter School, and I agreed to go on a tour with him. Students have to walk on the line. Students can't make noise in the hallway. Students can't do this, students can't do that. I wanted a good education, but not at the price of having to be a prisoner. There were a long list of what would end up with suspensions. Chewing gum, having a phone, being late to class, simple things. A friend from Moulton had enrolled in Sci Academy. The teachers were white and not interested in black problems in New Orleans. They couldn't relate or understand some of the issues she had in her family. Actually, it was apparent they didn't want to. I decided to stay at McMain. My new best friend Wesley had told me about this AP English class, which had a program attached to it, students at the center. She wanted to take the class. As simple as that, I was in the class. I was learning about everything. My education felt valuable again. I was doing college courses and always had work to do. I also got my confidence back. I also was given a platform that made me feel my feelings were legitimate. I found out I wasn't the only one complaining about the education system in New Orleans. I started learning about what really was going on in New Orleans. I started learning the truth behind them charter schools. My cousin didn't last at Sci. His mother died from AIDS, and my uncle was in Texas. Doing right in school was his ticket to be able to stay with my grandmother in New Orleans. However, Aaron had a learning and mental disability. He had behavior issues. He needed extra help and support. But that wasn't the job of the charter school system. Charter schools were supposed to take aim at at-risk students, to educate them, to help them succeed. New Orleans is filled with at-risk students, so one would think that maybe a bunch of schools becoming chartered would do some good. All of the at-risk students I knew that attended charter schools, all were put out. My cousin had to move back to Texas. My friend from elementary school transferred to a different charter school. My friend that needed help the most was a girl from across the street. She lived with an abusive aunt, and both of her parents were on drugs. She was kicked out of Psy Academy and sent to Swartz, an alternative school, a prison school. She was supposed to graduate in 2012, but only graduated a couple of months ago. The more I learned about what charter schools were supposed to do while saying what they were actually doing in reality, I became outraged. The last thing New Orleans needed was for the at-risk students to get pushed to the streets. Teachers for America didn't give a damn about the youth of New Orleans and what was best for them. Student loan forgiveness and a party city, just to discipline some black children and teach here and there, it was a golden opportunity in a city that couldn't afford it. It's a story we've seen so many times. White people finding prestige through being able to own, with charter schools being able to control the mind and body of black students. Our education system became a business. Who care about the future of poor black students when there's a profit to be made via the education system? Not charter schools. I became grateful for students at the center. Class was like therapy. We all had problems. New Orleans had ditched us all a bad hand of cards, even the Vietnamese students. We sat in a circle, read our most recent readings, and gave comments on them. That class made us a family. In that circle, stories of molestation, incarceration, of abuse, family gambling, poverty, any and everything, we shared. We cried and we laughed. This was the education that New Orleans needed. We decided what we were going to work on. We dominated the discussions. We were challenged. We felt like we were worth something. Nobody could tell us different. Jerome Morgan, wrongfully incarcerated in Angola State Penitentiary, our class was on it. We was writing him and a judge, sending him books to read and journals to write. We took field trips to the courthouse to peck out his trials. This is the education that New Orleans needs. If mass incarceration is constantly targeting people that look like us, why aren't we learning about the issue in our classrooms and what we can do about it? There was no such thing as coming out of SAC and not being prepared for college. I was assigned more papers and materials to read at SAC than what I'm actually given at Bard. When I received my full scholarship to Bard College in New York, I didn't have the money to get there. No one in my family did. College was supposed to be my moment, and the closer it got to leaving, the more it seemed as if I couldn't go. Kalamu told me, "I'm not gonna let you mess this up for yourself."
I didn't say that.
All right, he said.
Say what I tell him what I told him.
He said, "I'm not gonna let you fuck this up for yourself." He bought my one-way ticket, money from his own pocket. I, a student, was that valuable to my teacher. From that moment, I knew that he truly believed in me. It's this type of love and guidance that will change New Orleans, but we're running out of Mr. Randels and Kalamus. The students are not in the center. Majority of the teachers who were natives and loved their jobs have retired. McMain is the last school that is not chartered and no longer have SEC. If our education slips away, our youth slips away. After the youth, the culture and the tradition. Once the culture and tradition is gone, New Orleans is gone. I'm not speaking of gone how they said New Orleans was in Alabama. I'm speaking of gone without any possibility of return. No FEMA, no road home, no Red Cross, no insurance money, nothing. Gone, gone. It's 10 years later in New Orleans. We aren't fighting an unnatural disaster. We are fighting capitalism and the privatization of our public schools that have potential to be just as good as a public school in any other state. Public schools that have the potential to produce such successful young black people. Hurricane Katrina have nothing on the struggle we fight today, but it's a battle that cannot be lost. There's no room for a new New Orleans. We didn't allow Hurricane Katrina to take New Orleans away, and we also won't allow the privatization of public schools to demolish the city we were built with our bare hands. Thank you.
Go home, yeah.
We're gonna go home. Ashley, you're next.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think she covered everything. Let me put this out here. I always have to make like some type of preamble. So, I do not like public speaking. Just gonna throw it out here. I'm terrible at this. If I start fumbling over my words,
Close to them.
You know why. So I'm going to read two pieces as well. First, I've been a part of SAC since I was like 15. How many years ago?
5 years.
Oh, 5 years ago. Oh, no. I was way longer than that. Yeah, so I've been a part of SAC for a long time. I'm currently co-director, and I'm a first-year teacher at my alma mater, McDonough 35, which is where I started work with Kalamu and Jim at SAC. So I guess one of the things that I know we're going to talk about this more as we get into the dialogue. I know we're talking about public education and what it's turned into as a result of Hurricane Katrina and the charter school takeover. And I guess one of the things, if I had to compare or contrast students at the center and the work that we've done around education for all of these years, because we've been in existence since 1996, 97, 96, to the way these charter schools have tried to address some of the issues in education, is that you have one system, students at the center, that sees the community and the students as valuable resources who have the capabilities to solve their own problems. And we do that in the classroom through, I guess, what can be called participatory action research, right? Where they think about the issues that are concerning them. They address those issues through research, through community engagement. And then you have, on the charter school side, that looks at the young people and their communities and their culture that they come from as deficient, right, and defective, and something that needs to be completely replaced and wiped out. Right? But what they're wiping out and what they're dispossessing is this knowledge, right, that we all have in our communities to kind of address our issues and our problems. So, and a big part of that is connecting the current issues that we have to the struggles that we've had throughout history, right? So a huge emphasis in SAC is the belief that young people need to see themselves as part of a continuum of social justice, right? So that we have always been kind of doing this work to save ourselves, and we don't need other people to come in and save us. We need people to come and join and help us. And so with that in mind, I'm going to read something specifically from Malik, because he talked about Juan Malo, and I didn't learn about Juan Malo until I was in an SAC class, and I didn't learn about the Maroons until I was in a writing class, actually, so not even a history class. I was in a writing class where I learned about my history, right, and the fact that our people have always been fighting. This is nothing new, and that we need to see ourselves as a continuum. So I'm going to read that from Malik, but it also kind of addresses what Sonny Patterson said the other night, last night, where she said that, you know, there were young people who couldn't envision a future, and what does that mean when you can't even envision a different way of living? And for me, and I think one of the things that SAC has as its core is the belief that through looking to the past and through like really examining and thinking about the past, you can figure out ways to deal with the present and create, right? Take steps to create that alternative or that different view. And so that's where this piece is coming from. So it's called Juan Malo, Saint Malo. I have some French in this. So I wrote this when I was like in 11th or 10th grade. I don't speak French very well, so I'm gonna butcher this, but anyways, all right. Juan Malo, Saint Malo. Malo the visionary. In 1774, Juan Malo buried his axe in the first cypress tree of Guillerly land, saying, Malheur un blanc qui passera ses bonnet. I think I did okay. Woe to the white who would pass his boundary. This boundary was Louisiana swamps where the ghostly white fog hung stubbornly to the roots of the old cypress trees, their long trunks like guardians looking over the swamp's creatures. He looked around the dead swamp, standing motionless like a picture. Amongst the moss-covered trees, he envisioned his maroon colonies. using the grayish mist of fog and the ancient faces of the cypress to keep enemies away. He could see his band, men and women, painting a rainbow of yellows, reds, and mahoganies on the swamp's living canvas. No longer slaves, men with masters and laws to break their backs and spirits. Instead, he saw fine craftsmen shaping cypress into the sturdy chairs to sit the elderly and tables to sit their wives and little children. Malo looked upon the house decks of his mind and saw the women, no longer the muse of the world, talking without bending and breaking or cutting or pulling, but laughing and living a free life. Freedom buzzed in his ear like swamp mosquitoes, dripped from his mind like cypress blood. The axe, like a dagger in the cypress heart, set the boundary of freedom. And so he said, woe to the white who would pass his boundary. So that's well. And okay. Oh, do you mind if I read another piece? All right, so I'm going to read another piece that that addresses the change that was happening right after Hurricane Katrina. Just part of it? Okay, so we can keep it moving. So it's just called Honoring Community. In the summer, so this actually, the thing that I'm talking about happened right before Katrina, but it kind of like, it's weird in that it kind of foreshadows what started to happen after Katrina. So Honoring Community. In the summer of 2005, I had the rare privilege to see an ancient community working together to make themselves stronger. In this community where people sit in a circle on the floor, there were expert hunters, farmers, and medicine men. Each person had a skill to share, and in the event that the medicine man was absent, people did not die because everyone was taught the healing properties of certain herbs and plants. This ancient community was part of a play by students from Frederick Douglass and Chalmette High Schools, both schools in neighborhoods that would be severely devastated by Hurricane Katrina. Chalmette, a predominantly white high school, is in St. Bernard Parish, just across the parish line from Frederick Douglass, the all-black New Orleans public school where I was working. As part of the State of the Nation program, a project of the Douglass Community Coalition led by coalition member Art Spot Production, these students dealt with the problem of inequalities of public education, specifically starting with the New Orleans public school system. In the 6 weeks that we convened to create this play, a group of black and white students who wouldn't otherwise be affiliated with each other became a community. I've seen them with my own eyes, learning from each other's strengths and each one growing stronger. As much as it made me happy to see this utopia of learning and understanding and community development, it was also heart-crushing because in the real world, a world where the individual is more important than the group, this type of community learning would not be awaiting them at their respective schools, unless they were able to be a part of a program such as Students at the Center, which links community to school and develops youth voices and leadership. I know of no other program that encourages students to learn through their own experiences, which means that everyone can be a teacher in his or her own way. How well you do in the class is not dependent on your grades or whether or not you can pass a test, but on how well you can connect your experiences to the current events, policies, and decisions that affect your life. SAC equips all its students with the ability to be leaders in their own schools and communities. All of us who care about New Orleans and the surrounding parishes have the opportunity to learn from the SAC community. We can make our school system reflect true equality and community cooperation. One of the first and most critical steps to having a public school system that works for each student is to break down the barriers that divide communities. These barriers include selective admission schools, now we can add charter schools, that have the ability to design their student body based on admission test scores, or simply self-selection by students, their families, and their teachers. Separating students who can achieve on certain levels from those who may not be able to achieve on those levels hurts and weakens all students. Instead of creating a system that allows students from the same neighborhood with varying degrees of knowledge to learn and help each other be better students, these selective admission schools rip vital human resources from their own communities while discriminating against others, but these others are also vital human resources. I know this because I attended McDonough 35, a selective admission school. Yet my relatives and friends in my own community attended George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, and Douglass High Schools, all of which were considered low-performing schools. Although I didn't initially understand some of my family's resentment of the high school I chose to attend, somehow I did feel like I was a part of the abandonment of not just those in my family, but also those in my community. I understood that my education was somewhat better than theirs, but why? Whenever I walked into my cousin Eddie's room when he was doing homework, he would stop immediately and throw his books aside. I knew he was having trouble because his mother told me so. Even though we were cousins, for some strange reason, the fact that he attended Carver and I, McDonough 35, made it hard for him to come to me for help, even when I was clearly offering it. Imagine if all the medicine men, all the hunters, musicians, and farmers decided to create their own communities, excluding or rarely dealing with those with other skills. They would notice that their communities would become gravely destitute, as musicians realize they know nothing about hunting. The hunters can't heal the sick, and the medicine men starve to death because they don't know how to cook. The ancients understood one thing we failed to realize: you can't be a community by yourself. And even if you find a group of people who are just as smart as you or can play an instrument just as fine as you can, there are skills that the group lacks and desperately needs. If we are serious about creating a better New Orleans and we understand that a better school system is an important factor in that, then we know what we have to do. There is only one way to eliminate low-performing schools for good: get rid of those schools that separate and destroy the potential of community.
We're going to have Kalamu go next because he needs to make his plane.
I'm 68 years old. I get up some mornings and wonder, why am I still struggling to make change? Still hopeful that my actions can contribute to creating the conditions that make revolution both inevitable and irresistible. Why do I continue to fight against oppression and exploitation, especially when my life could be made more comfortable and pleasurable if I would just give up fighting against the status quo? My joints ache, my physical health makes it difficult for me to continue on these long marches, getting up early to prepare for battle, going for long stretches in the trenches of militant actions, staying up late to evaluate the day's work, analyze the conditions, and plan out tomorrow's course of action. Struggle is hard, but then I realize it's not about me. My life is not about me as an individual, but about me as a social creature. I realize if I'm not working on behalf of others, then I cannot actualize who I individually might truly be. My father, country-bred, war-tested, World War II and the Korean conflict, plus the domestic struggles for his rights as a black man in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and beyond. My father, Big Val Ferdinand, taught his 3 sons by both word and deed: you don't get no credit for what you do for yourself. You're supposed to do that. You get credit for helping others. I do what I do because ultimately I cannot be the person I want to become if I don't work on behalf of my fellow human beings. Working for self-actualization through working with and for others is a bedrock principle of both revolution and love, which ultimately exists within a symbiotic relationship. Revolution without love is barbaric cruelty, and love without revolution is self-serving and empty hedonism. Revolution is ultimately about overturning ourselves as products of a deformed society and hopefully creating a whole and healthy society within which we all can live, develop, and contribute to creating a better and more beautiful life. In fact, that is the revolutionary objective: to make the world better and more beautiful than when we were born into it. Here's a basic summation of what I understand to be our SAC Students at the Center operating principles. We identify our immediate field of operation as the working class black community of New Orleans. Our watchwords are simple: start with where you're at to get to where you want to go. Start with what you know to learn whatever you want to know. Start with what you know to learn whatever you want to know. In practice, this means, as Almacar Cabral teaches, literally beginning with the physical and social ground beneath our feet, grappling with the physical and social reality within which we live. We do not boil this down to some mechanical intellectual exercise, but instead make this a fundamental practice of our daily teaching, so much so that the intellectual work of earlier students becomes a major part of the curriculum of today's students. We literally include the writings of previous students as integral aspects of the current curriculum. In order to successfully value our students, we must question ourselves and each other as we struggle to create a better world. Relationships mean more than possessions. If we have to die to get there, then there is ultimately no heaven there. If we have to die to get there, then there's ultimately no heaven there. And in order to successfully find a heaven, we must understand why and how we are in hell. The classroom size must be reduced if we are to actually reach and transform ourselves. There can be no overlooking of this fundamental fact. When the classroom is over 15 or so students, we cannot develop genuine and thoroughgoing relationships because we never get to know and value each other as individuals whose goal is to work as a team. We must teach ourselves to consider and value our social conditions. Teaching landlocked people to fish is not teaching revolution, it is teaching frustration. Consider your conditions and shape your pedagogy to respond to the physical and human conditions. What works in the forest may be impossible in the desert. What is efficient on the land may be futile on the sea. So carefully consider your environment. Look at the social norms of the society you are trying to change. We develop our curriculum by considering what are our needs. What strengths can we build on? What weaknesses can we strengthen? What disabilities can we eliminate? And what shortcomings do we have to tolerate as we go through our stages of development? The fundamental principle is teach dialectics rather than essentialism. There's no one right way. Contradictions are healthy. The essence of life is found in motion, not in stability. That which is most solid is that which is in organized motion. That which is most solid is that which is in organized motion. Relationships cannot be static. They too must change as reality changes. Discussions we can have at 13 and 14 are not the same as those we need when we are 20 or 30. We ask our students to look at their lives. We consider who we are as we work to become who we want to be. This is how we create the book. We created the book, Men We Love, Men We Hate. Right there. We looked at our social reality. How many of us live under the same roof with a biological mother, biological father, and biological siblings? We discovered that the nuclear family is not our social reality. And then rather than bemoaning or pathologizing our social conditions, we move on. This gives us a healthy basis to analyze sexism and other isms, conditions of our personal lives without wallowing in self-pity. This is especially crucial at the high school level. Our social realities include dealing with rape and other forms of sexual trauma and exploitation, dealing with self-mutilation and other forms of harming the self in reaction to untreated social trauma, dealing with gender identification and other forms of personal development. These are not simple matters, but nor are they so complex that they cannot be acknowledged and dealt with within the sanctuary of the SAC class. This is one of the crucial roadblocks we face. The status quo does not want us to deal with our deformities. Many well-meaning individuals, particularly authority figures, are adamantly opposed to a revolutionary recognition of social reality, and thus, in order to deal with these social realities as part of our pedagogy, we must consider the conditions and not engage in futile battles with authority figures, even as we engage in subversive work with our students. In asymmetrical warfare of us against the establishment, as with any guerrilla grouping, surprise is a very important weapon. Deeds, not words, will win the battle. Moreover, the critical principle is to see and interact with students as agents of their own education rather than objects of our educational work. Rather than the status quo truism that the teacher teaches and the student learns, SA believes that the student learns and the student teaches. We are all students and we must all be teachers. We demonstrate democracy by practicing social learning. Each one teach one. We all can and should learn from each other. Once we have accurately assessed who we are and where we are, then we can begin to develop goals and objectives as well as actually get in motion into going to where we want to go. This motion-oriented pedagogy means not only paying attention to who we are, but also offering examples of who we want to become. In the classroom, we must value diversity, become a sanctuary within which it is possible to be oneself without stigmatizing the social periphery. Indeed, we ought to embrace the other, the gender other, the ethnic other, the age other. Second, after considering where we are, who we are, and whom we want to become, we must heal our illnesses and fight the power. We have all been wounded just by living here. We need to tend to our physical and social wounds. A sick soldier cannot effectively engage in the protracted struggle that is necessary to create a successful revolution. Emotional disabilities are much more crippling than physical disabilities. We must pay particular attention to the gender dynamics. The devaluing and abuse of women is more prevalent and more pernicious than the racial white supremacist dynamic, even as we are generally taught that the problem is in black and white. Our ultimate problem is in the devaluing of humanity. And this devaluing is most evident in the devaluing of the feminine within our society. A student asked, "You know what I really want to know?" What you really want to know? Where's the center? First we laughed, and then we said, "You and your fellow students are the center." The center is not a place, but a relationship. You are the center. Your life and your well-being must become the center of our education. Towards this end, we teach our students about Paulo Freire and the negativity of the banking system of education. We teach them that memorizing is not intelligence. Critical thinking is the only right answer that matters. Critical thinking. There are no essentialities beyond change, beyond motion. Certainties of the sea will not address difficulties of the land. We teach Naomi Klein's shock doctrine, especially because we in New Orleans are on the anvil of disaster capitalism. We teach that our conditions are no accident, but rather the result of intentional exploitation and oppression. We teach Vygotsky, because understanding human development is fundamental. This development includes the use of tools, and that language is one of the most important tools we have. We must learn to use language to help us identify who we are and what our conditions are, and use language to communicate with others that which we have learned, and more importantly, to share our experiences with others. To teach what we know and learn about what we don't know. To tell the world who we are and learn from the world who they are. We teach Jean Onion because although the status quo espouses that America is a classless society, education has a definite class structure. Working class schools use a very different pedagogy from professional class schools, which in turn are different from ruling class pedagogy. In order to teach about the class distinctions in the schoolroom, we must also teach basic distinctions of class. Those who survive by selling their labor, those who achieve levels of comfort by managing the labor of others, behavior, and well-being of their fellow citizens, and those who thrive by owning the major means of productions and by living off of unearned income. That is income generated by owning essentially rent and profit. There is more, but we must start by teaching the basics of class structure so we can truly understand our conditions. Obviously, there's much, much more, but that is for another occasion. This is a mini course, a mere introduction. In February of 2016, thanks in large part to the prodding and enabling of Professor George Lipsitz, I will offer a more detailed overview of the SAC pedagogy. This is not just about what Kalamu thinks or what Jim Randels thinks. We also teach Ashley Jones talking about community, and Tareian King demonstrating questioning authority, along with other SAC students. I shout out Ashley and Tareian not because they are the best and the only, but rather because they are present here today, and you have the opportunity to interact with them, to ask them questions, and to listen to their responses. A basic principle: if we are to successfully recruit future revolutionaries, the messengers are equally as important as the message. Who articulates the word is equally important as the word itself. The goal is not abstract nor purely intellectual. The goal is found in the flesh and blood embodiment of our thoughts and emotions. We must be what we espouse. Moreover, we must understand our own capacity to become thinkers, leaders, and revolutionaries. We all can participate in making change. We at SAC believe that revolutionary education is education for all and not simply for the best and the brightest, or for the cream of the crop, or for those who are good at taking tests, or any other exclusionary category. Revolutionary pedagogy insists on teaching and learning from each other. We must teach all and learn from all. We also believe that creating a revolutionary pedagogy necessarily must include those who have been demonized and oppressed. Within our Black communities, that specifically means responding to the inhuman American criminal justice system. Again, not simply in the abstract, but rather in the actual. We encourage exchanges and learning from those who are or have been incarcerated. Indeed, you can more often find a formerly convicted felon working with our students than a PhD expert. This is not to denigrate the PhD, but instead is to elevate those who have been oppressed, those who have been exploited, and to understand we must learn from all levels of society. Moreover, they are we. They are we. They are our fathers, our brothers, our mothers, our sisters, our cousins, friends, and acquaintances. Do we or do we not believe in social rehabilitation? The former prisoner who has thought about why they were imprisoned and struggled to understand how to change their conditions are among the best teachers in any society. We believe that they must be included in our pedagogy. One of our next publications is Go to Jail, Challenging a System of Injustice. If incarceration is a major aspect of our social reality, and it is, if incarceration is a major fact in our lives, and it is, if in 2015 more Black men today are incarcerated than the absolute number of Black men who were enslaved in 1815, then we have a responsibility to respond to this very real and pervasive social reality. By a show of hands, how many of you have a family member or close friend who is or has been incarcerated? Within our New Orleans classroom, the percentage of hands that are raised is well over 60%. Within our specific set of conditions, we have a revolutionary responsibility to transform the upraised hands to clenched fists who learn from our conditions and participate in the struggle to change ourselves and our world. I'm a born-again pagan. A pagan is someone who does not believe in any organized religion. When I was born, I did not believe in any religion. My parents sent me to church. Roughly when I was 15, I left the church and became born again. I'm also a materialist. I believe in starting from the specifics of my physical and social reality, and that ideas and emotions shape our consciousness, but that we can use our consciousness to reshape ourselves, our societies, and ultimately the world. I get up every morning because I refuse to lay down to capitalism. I refuse to lay down to racism. I refuse to lay down to sexism and all the other oppressive and exploited isms of our society. I get up because I want to be a better person and understand that I cannot become better if I do not help you become better. I get up so that I can go out in the world and meet you, and together we can create a better and more beautiful world. Behold, comrades, working together, we are our future. Indeed, unless we work together, the only future we will have is one of continued oppression and exploitation. No one can any longer deny that we are oppressed, that we are exploited, that our planet is being destroyed by global capitalism and unthinking physical and social explorations and dominations. The fundamental question we face is not what is wrong, but rather, what are we going to do about it? Within SAC, we believe in our capacity to analyze our conditions and work to create better and more beautiful individual, social organizations, and lifestyles. We believe in our capacity to do this. Say it with me. I am me.
I am me.
I didn't hear y'all. I am me.
I am me.
And together with you,
And together with you,
we can create a better world.
we can create a better world.
I'm going to do a piece because it's better.
Well, give it to Jim.
Give it to Jim? Okay.
I've been teaching in public high schools in New Orleans for 31 years, and I graduated from public schools in New Orleans. And one question that is often on our audience's mind after they hear Kalamu and SAC make a presentation is, well, how are you able to teach like that in schools, right? If you hear some discussions about public education in our country today, there's talk about Common Core curriculum, or there's talk about tests to get into college. There's seldom talk about students being experts. And in the remarks I'm going to make, I want to talk about one specific institution in New Orleans that when I started teaching in 1984, I became a member of. And in New Orleans, in Black history and labor struggles, the work of our ancestors has always been member-based organizing. It hasn't been philanthropy, it hasn't been other things. Folks, if you look at the Garvey movement in New Orleans, people paid dues from their money. When I joined AFT Local 527 in 1984 as a teacher, I was given the gift of Black elders to mentor me as a young teacher. Part of that gift was a vision that they were part of working Black struggles from maroon colonies to the present. And in talking about Katrina 10 years later, I think it's important to talk about this one organization. Shana alluded to it earlier, as did Bill, but you should be aware that in 2005, the largest group of organized laborers in the state of Louisiana were teachers. Now that's a testament to how piss poor the economy was in the state. How do you have the geographic location of being at the mouth of Mississippi River and your largest group of organized laborers are teachers? Well, that's a long story that I won't get into, but it's the reality in which we found ourselves when Katrina hit. And one of the targets for the privatization of public education after Katrina was AFT Local 527. And that target wasn't just because it was labor, it's because it was Black. And to help you understand that, I'll talk a little bit about the history of AFT Local 527, because it's a different history than many of our brother and sister unions in the Northeast. And I also want to frame a reason to give this emphasis on AFT Local 527. One of the things that Kalamu frequently says, and we've talked about revolution today a good bit, but one of the first duties of a revolutionary is to survive. And one of the things we need to do is look at what are the institutions and mechanisms of survival that are afforded us. One of the reasons we've taught this way in public schools in New Orleans since 1996 and really before, because these teachers have been doing it for generations. Kalamu's mother was a member of AFT Local 527. and a number of my mentors were recruited into the union by her. The space to do this work is because of a collective bargaining agreement, because of a history of a way of teaching. So the attack on this union was an attack on the way we teach. In 1937, AFT Local 527 was founded. In 1931 or 32, the Depression's going on, right? And you have a segregated Jim Crow school system in New Orleans. They made a decision, Orleans Parish School Board, to save money. They were going to cut salaries of all teachers. There was a differential pay scale. White teachers paid here, and you can decide where here is, and black teachers paid here. A couple of years later, they said, you know, our finances are better, and they restored the white teachers' pay to where it had been and kept the black teachers with that increased gap in wealth that has been pointed out earlier in the day. The white teachers and the black teachers struggled together to restore the black teacher pay to the pre-cut level. And the black teachers began to say, you know what? Our pay needs to be here. So this is an organization that has always fought for this economic justice. And you should be aware that it creates the space for us to do the work, and that when Katrina hit and there was an attempt to change the demographic of the city, which Eric and others have demonstrated, and Bill has demonstrated, because of the failure of a business community in New Orleans and the racism of a business community in New Orleans, the largest group of black homeowners in New Orleans when the hurricane hit were teachers. The largest group of people participating in an organized way in voting who were black were teachers. The largest number of college-educated people in New Orleans who were black were teachers. If you fire 7,500 of us and displace us, replace us with Teach for America folks from Brown University and other universities, then you have decimated a black population. Kalamu's brother, one of his brothers, is a physician. He couldn't come back till what, this year, Kalamu? To practice medicine in New Orleans. Who was he gonna, his patients were teachers. So I think it's important to see this. The chartering and the privatization of public education in New Orleans has meant a number of things, but in particular to talk about this group of black teachers and the disrespect of elders. A retired teacher now health insurance premiums were $300 a month in 2005. It's now $850 a month. And this union still stands and makes space for this type of education.